But none of the benefits that could be identified for New Brunswick and Newfoundland either apply or have any meaning here in Victoria, except for the jobs and the spin-offs from the actual construction project itself. Let me repeat the benefits that they identified and then think whether they apply here in Victoria. Reduced health risks associated with safer surface water. There are no health risks associated with our present system. Reduced human health associated with recreation, such as swimming and fishing. I don't notice anybody not swimming off our waters. Improved recreational opportunities. Improved property values. This is amounted to $600 million in the Far East. But it will be amount to zero in Victoria. Putting a secondary treatment plant in Victoria is not going to increase the property values of the citizens of Victoria. In summary, the cost-benefit model used by the CCME consultants to justify secondary treatment is in no way applicable to Victoria. There will be no economic benefits, but there will be huge costs. On page 8 of the report, the consultants made a particularly important note, which is very applicable to Victoria. They say, and I quote it, "In many cases, significant BOD and TSS reductions are already in place," which is the case in Victoria. "And the marginal costs of achieving the proposed standard are very high," that's the case here, "and are not highly valued by households." I'm sure that's the case. In such cases, the marginal damage to the environment of existing treatment systems should be assessed to see if, in fact, they are not cost-effective. This is the case in Victoria. Our present system works well. The costs of achieving perceived higher standard of treatment are very high. There will be no economic benefits, and the household benefits will proceed no value. Thank you very much.
It is my opinion that the scope of such a large project, the adequate disposal of wastewater under consideration, must first undergo a thorough evaluation of the existing system to be conducted by scientists, health engineers, marine engineers, construction engineers, and even possibly involving Department of Fisheries and oceans officials to adequately determine the level of detectable pollutants which are currently present in our existing systems. Thereby, their findings and recommendations could then be reviewed by the Western Water Committee for further action. I respectfully suggest it is inconceivable that members of this committee are expected to give their blessings and final approval of the proposed mega project without having a substantiation being received from the aforementioned professional bodies. It is also of note that several former medical health officers employed by the Capital Regional District, and also including the Honourable David Anderson, former Federal Minister of the Environment, have all repeatedly publicly voiced their objections to the proposed wastewater plant. Environmental inspectors employed by the Capital Regional District repeatedly collect hundreds of samples of drinking water throughout the district for an array of evidence of pollution for public health purposes. There were occasions when municipal water supplies were taken by the local health department due to public complaints of taste and discoloration.
Excuse me, your time is up.
Sorry.
Your time's up.
But,
Your time is up.
oh well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Chair and directors, my name is Bob Furber. I'm a resident of Saanich. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. In relation to Agenda Item 7, I want to address the new federal wastewater regulations. This is because a number of CRD directors still use the new federal regulations as a reason for forcing secondary sewage treatment on the CRD. I realize it may take some courage to stand your ground regarding the federal regulations, but the bottom line is the regulations are flawed, and there is nothing to stop the CRD and the provincial governments from challenging them and being successful. The objective of the federal wastewater systems effluent regulations is stated as, I quote, to reduce the threat to fish habitat and human health from fish consumption. So, we have been complying with objectives of these regulations for decades. After decades of monitoring and study after study, there is absolutely no evidence anywhere that Victoria's sewage discharges have posed any threat to fish, fish habitat, and human health from fish consumption. Alternately, you can say no to these regulations. What are the feds going to do, given that their objectives are already being met? Thank you.
I have grown up in Victoria, and I am the daughter of a wastewater treatment design engineer. So sewage treatment has been a topic of dinner table conversation since the time I was a consumer of the system. As you well understand, the CRD has been pressed into action by an order from the Ministry of Environment, the BC Ministry of Environment, to implement land-based secondary sewage treatment in the core area. Yet, there is no scientific or economic evidence proving that land-based secondary treatment is either necessary or beneficial in Greater Victoria. This should be a giant red flag for you as decision makers. We are at the point where we may commit to spend $782 million, to use your numbers, on an infrastructure project without a scrap of benefit-cost analysis. There have been no studies which indicate the economic impacts of public opinion on tourism, just as there are no studies which examine the greenhouse gas emissions of the proposed conveyance system or land-based secondary treatment. And those are not trivial, I assure you. The net environmental impacts of the resource recovery plant have not been tested against practical research models, and none of this plan has been measured against the status quo for whether the proposed plan is an improvement over our existing marine treatment process. Should we allow public opinion or ill-informed politicians from outside our region to bully the CRD into spending what will amount to more than $1 billion on a scientifically untested proposal? I have looked at the CTAC report, the marine monitoring reports, and the research put forward by various parties, and there is no conclusive recommendation for land-based secondary sewage treatment. The CTAC report, when read in whole, does not recommend immediate secondary treatment. You can excerpt any way you want from that report, but when you read it in full, as written, it does not indicate immediate secondary treatment. Dilution is not a long-term strategy, but that does not logically support that we leap into a short-term strategy which has no scientific basis. What we need to do is protect our environment and our economy. We need evidence-based decision-making, not decision-based evidence-making. Please pass these motions and recommend to the CRD board that we take the process back into our own hands in the CRD, where the decision and the impact will live. Thank you.
My name's Brian Burchill. I'm a resident of View Royal. I'd like to present the committee with some information that I think supports the two motions under agenda item number 7. My observation of this issue is that I think history is repeating itself. This year, the Government of Canada implemented the federal wastewater regulations, which mandated that all communities treat their wastewater to a single nationwide standard. The regulations do not stipulate what method of treatment must be employed to achieve the standard, but the objectives of the regulations state that the standard be achieved by secondary treatment or equivalent. 40 years ago this year, the U.S. implemented its Federal Water Pollution Control Act, better known as the Clean Water Act. That legislation also mandated a single nationwide standard and that it be achieved by secondary treatment. However, the legislation did not allow for the possibility of treatment methods equivalent to secondary. A multitude of U.S. communities objected to having the expense and disruption of a large infrastructure project forced on them that would provide little or no benefit to the environment or themselves compared to the system they currently used. The intransigence of the Environmental Protection Agency caused the communities to have to resort to the courts to get relief. Judges let evidence, science, and prudent public policy prevail against overzealous regulators. And nearly 50 U.S. coastal communities were granted waivers from the federal regulations. There were so many cases that the U.S. Congress commissioned the National Research Council to review the regulations. The NRC's report amounted to a rebuke of the single nationwide standard and made recommendations which led to the acknowledgement that the treatment capability of some coastal waters was equivalent to secondary treatment. Yet here we are 40 years later, and citizens are still needing to battle bureaucrats and politicians unwilling to accept that there are many regions of ocean which treat effluent as effectively as land-based secondary treatment. This committee will hear motions today intended to suspend the CRD's backward plan to replace our existing system of natural marine treatment of our wastewater with a land-based treatment system. Yes, Victoria's current system does treat our wastewater. Marine treatment is a bona fide method of treatment you can find referred to in wastewater engineering texts. Where the ocean is well mixed and rich in oxygen and microbes, it can replicate the digester and aeration ponds of land-based secondary systems. The Strait of Juan de Fuca is one such region of ocean. As to how well it can replicate, I quote from a 1987 Water Research Laboratory publication. There is sound scientific evidence that well-designed, sensibly located, and efficiently operated sea outfalls allow the sewage effluent to be subjected to the same processes of degradation and oxidation that occur in land-based sewage treatment plants, unquote. The treatment capability of the Strait is so effective that our current system reduces total suspended solids and biochemical oxygen demand to the regulation levels within less than 25 meters of the outfall pipes. And the energy to drive the processes is free, sustainable, and reliable. It's the energy of the tides. As for support for the motions and support for keeping Victoria's current system of natural marine treatment, I close by quoting the finding of the U.S. Congress regarding equivalence. The evidence is overwhelming. Thank you.
My name is John Farquharson, and I'm a Victoria resident. Directors, please do the right thing for Victoria, or with respect, step aside. Let me explain. A few weeks ago, I accompanied a colleague to a meeting with a member of this committee and a senior member of the wastewater treatment program. My colleague had asked for some help in making sense of why the board was going forward on this project. He had read and thought a lot about it, but still couldn't understand why the board would not call a halt until a full environmental assessment and cost-benefit analysis had been conducted. The first reason given by the committee member, and later repeated, was that the CRD had been ordered by the federal government to comply with its regulations. If the CRD fought back, directors could be fined up to $300,000 and go to jail. The other major reason provided was that provincial and federal funding was guaranteed. But if there was any delay, the money would be permanently withdrawn. Then the CRD would have to do the project anyway, but at its own expense. I listened and I thought, boy, I sure wouldn't want to be in this or any other CRD director's shoes, being threatened with a stick of fines and jail time and enticed with the carrot of federal funding. But later I thought, you know, I particularly wouldn't want to be in their shoes if I supported the project because of these threats and cajoling, not because I believed it was the best way forward, because of the scientific evidence, the environmental impact, and the cost-benefit ratio. That's why I salute the courage of CRD directors Zimmermann and Desjardins. They are not convinced, yet despite being subject to the same threats, the same cajoling, they are saying, hold on, wait a minute, we should not be doing this. So I call upon committee members to reflect for a moment. If your first and primary response to why you support this project is, like the committee member, I met with, the liability of fines and jail, rather than a clear and compelling presentation of the merits of the project, then maybe you should step aside as a director. You would no longer be liable and probably sleep a lot better at night. Alternatively, if your primary rationale is because of the carrot of millions of dollars of federal and provincial funding, I ask you to think about the source of this money. Much of it is the hard-earned tax dollars of British Columbians outside the CRD and Canadians from across the country. I don't think you have the right to take their tax money for a plan that you are not convinced is the best thing to do based on the merits of the project. Why should British Columbians outside the CRD and Canadians outside BC subsidize your unwillingness to demonstrate the same tenacity, the same resolve as directors Zimmermann and Desjardins? Directors, I ask that unless you are thoroughly convinced that this project is the right thing to do, then support their motions. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
It is a plan based on optics and politics and completely ignores the science. In fact, your own chairperson put it beautifully in 2007. In a quote from the Oak Bay News of 12th December of that year, Ms. Blackwell said, quote, "It is basically a political decision. People probably got tired of having to deal with Mr. Floaty," unquote. And for those who believe the CTAP report of 2006 advised secondary treatment, please read the report carefully. It stated that, quote, "With our excellent natural treatment already in place, there is no reason to believe that human health risks or ecological consequences will arise in the future," unquote. An issue of the Marine Pollution Bulletin in 2008 carried an editorial by 8 scientists based here at UVic, Sydney Ocean Sciences Institute and the UBC. Its title was "Sewage Treatment Wasted, the Victoria Example." It stated, quote, "The concept of natural sewage treatment is well recognized. It makes no sense to replace a natural system with a human creation that has harmful environmental consequences," unquote. I prefer to believe 8 scientists whose job is to protect our oceans instead of believing what one MLA said to me on this matter. She said, quote, "Sometimes in politics the optics wins out over the science. You just have to accept that," unquote. This seems to me a perversion of the role of a politician. I would ask you to cast aside any excuses such as "we're just obeying orders" or "the train has already left the station," and do what we expect of our elected officials, and that is to prevent this proposed fiscal and environmental disaster. Thank you for listening.
My name is Ray Zimmermann. I'm the director of Sea Greenbelt Society, and I'm making this presentation on behalf of Sea. Our interest in the past 2 decades has been watershed protection, parks, urban settlements being compact, and primarily the ecological health of our area. This is a breathtaking failure to carry out political responsibilities. Sea will add its name to the list of organizations and individuals which are against this project. And we hope that some of the monies and efforts will be spent on the primary problem. It's not moving pollutants from the sea to the land to the air, whether you burn it, shuffle it here or there. It's getting rid of the pollutants initially. So it would be wonderful if you took some of this $1 billion and used it to try to influence the industrial process which uses so many pollutants. Thanks very much.
Support for this project by the Core Area Liquid Waste Committee indicates to me that by pursuing the project, the committee is not representing the best interests of the core municipalities it represents, their residents, or their land, sea, or air environments. Meanwhile, the real threats to our local marine environment are not being addressed. The CTAP review, for one, of 2006 also found that the present stormwater, sanitary and combined overflows and other discharges, particularly into the surface waters in Victoria's harbours, create environmental contamination of considerable concern. The City of Victoria, which provides not only for its residents' sanitary needs, but also for the thousands of non-resident commuting city workers and our very welcome visitors, still largely depends upon its original infrastructure of old pipes. I understand also that Uplands in Oak Bay still uses outdated combined discharging of waste and stormwater through its storm drains into the sea. Even a fraction of the $500 million which we are considering devoting to the land-based sewage treatment would help greatly in either of these. Is my time up? Okay. I urge members of this committee at this crucial time to take the wisest and most responsible path and support the recommendations of Director Derman and Desjardins. Thank you.
My name is John Burtbush. I'm an advocate of the environment. I'm an advocate for appropriate, clean, green wastewater treatment. I'm an advocate for the public good. I speak today in support of the motions presented by Directors Derman and Desjardins. Our system of democratic governance is classically informed by underlying moral values. When major public issues arise, it is essential to return to foundational values to guide our choices. We elect those who govern us to carry out two fundamentals of democracy. First, to perform the public's bidding using its physical resources, and second, to govern for the common good. The common good is that which is in the interest or well-being of the whole community. Fiscal and environmental responsibility is thus a moral issue. How we achieve it, and at whose or what expense, is a moral choice. The prerequisite for establishing physical and environmental priorities in the nation, the province, and the region is the commitment to an ancient and time-honored idea, the common good. How do we work together to allocate public funds in the most effective manner? How do we treat each other, especially the poorest and most vulnerable? How do we treat the earth itself, now straining for survival under the impact of pervasive and wasteful resource consumption? Please do the right thing for our region. Listen to the oceanographers and the scientists who advise you that a land-based sewage treatment system is a low, low, low environmental priority. They are powerful advocates for the environment and common sense. Listen to their suggestions of better ways to protect the environment with our precious eco-dollars. Please seek the common good of the region by resisting the provincial and federal levels of government. Tell them that we will not endure the imposition of this massively intrusive project when there is neither scientific rationale nor the democratic will to pursue it. Please support the call for an environmental assessment of the project and the call for a cost-benefit analysis. In short, protect our oceans, advocate for the public good. These are the moral choices you are required to make. Thank you.
My name is John Motherwell. I'm a professional engineer with over 40 years of experience in municipal sewage collection, treatment, and disposal projects. In 1999, my firm won the Environmental Award of the Association of Professional Engineers and Geoscientists of the Province of British Columbia in the Design, Construction, and Monitoring category for the sewage treatment plant and outfall for the town of Port McNeill in northern Vancouver Island. I'm here to offer my views concerning the current project by the CRD for on-land treatment of sewage originating in the core area in place of the current system for discharge to the marine waters by way of two existing outfalls. When one is charged with the responsibility of designing a system for the disposal of domestic sewage to marine waters, one must first find the answer to the question: will the marine water body accept the discharge without degradation of its public health and environmental aspects? For the current outfalls, the answer is given by the CRD's own annual monitoring reports, which provide no scientific evidence of harm to those aspects, either now or projected. There is no dead zone, no Mr. Floaties from the current screen sewage discharge of what is between 99.94
a 99.97% on the CRD's figures of water.
I'm very conflicted to be here today because I've never taken a stance in my 40 years living here on any side to the port I have now taken on this particular stance. It's difficult when you cross over a side and you know you're going to face people like you and come out with a different decision. You have a very difficult decision to make, a very hard decision to make. The optics of having the sewage treatment plant built or not built is not in any way creating a hazard towards tourism coming to Victoria. That's poppycock. There isn't a shred of evidence that supports that people will not come here because the sewage treatment plant is or is not here in Victoria. What we are doing is pristine. We are like, in my mind, the devil and the deep blue sea. If you think of sewage treatment, then think of yourself as the devil. If you think of the deep blue sea, then think of nature's way of treating with the problem that we have treated for all these years and can treat for many years to come. The optics is what's driving this and what's driven it to this table today. And optics are a very difficult thing to deal with. Sometimes optics have nothing to do with reality and truth. The truth is that when you travel, and think about it yourselves, has any one of you ever said, I'm not going to go to India, I'm not going to go to China, I'm not going to go to San Diego because they don't treat their sewage? I don't think so. We don't put that on the top of our list, or probably not even on the bottom of our list. We go there because we believe what we want to see is the culture and the nature of the people we're visiting. What we're doing is correct. What we're doing is right. I represent many of the restaurants here in Victoria. I'm the president of the Culinary Tourism Society of BC, and we rely heavily on tourism as why we are driving our particular product. If we in any way thought that by doing what we're doing is wrong, we would not stand here today. Please support the motion. I beseech you, I respect you, but please put aside your personal views and vote for what is right. Thank you very much for your time.
I'm not an ocean scientist. I don't believe any of you are either. However, I am the retired Dean of the Faculty of Engineering at the University of Victoria and a former director of NSERC, the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council. In both those capacities, I've had the opportunity to review the work of the ocean scientists at UVic. I'm just here to tell you that these people are a world-class group. They're one of the better ocean science organizations in the world. In my opinion, the best in Canada. We're fortunate to have them. So the moral's obvious. Please listen to them. Please take their advice very seriously. Do not set it aside without compelling reasons.
I am suggesting that meaningful public consultation is still needed prior to any further studies and reports to the Minister of the Environment claiming public consultation was part of the process, when in reality, meaningful consultation never took place. It would seem appropriate to quote Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, "It takes less time to do a thing right than it does to explain why you did it wrong."
Yes, we the citizens need to know all the relevant information about all political issues like this one. And not just the 14 CRD directors, but we the citizens, all of us, need to have the right and the ability to decide for ourselves by referendum on these important political issues. A framework of perpetual direct democracy by referendum is presented on this little booklet entitled Perpetual Direct Democracy, published by Amazon.com, and you can also read it online on our website at pacific.ca. I am Pedro Mora.